I'm calling them our group of doctors, is that they're committed to going out to our schools this week and next week prior to students going back to take a look, because now we have to start to connect the dots between positivity, say a positive case someplace, and what our schools look like. They visited our schools in April and May before any of this work was done. I believe that one of the schools, we have the principal at Campbell Park here, one of our schools was Campbell Park that we visited. Now we want to go back before students go back and say, so how did we do? What other suggestions might you fine tune? There's still some work to do with cafeterias, there is. I think we just need to say that up front. We're not there yet, but we're still exploring it, because even though we say that every school is different, there's still a mass gathering, and how can we limit that? I want doctors to be on our right and left shoulders to be able to define and to see what that looks like. So we are planning visits next week and the week after and this week also. In addition to that, I have the commitment from the same group of doctors that once we start back to school, and for the majority of it, we're going to talk about, we're talking about 50% capacity in our schools, even less to capacity of the building. We want to visit the schools when they're fully operationalized, when students are back, to see what is it, how is it working? It's one thing to develop a plan, it's another thing to monitor that plan and to see how that plan is truly working and being carried out. There's a few schools, such as some of our open pod elementary schools, that we have to address, before. We have to try to mitigate some of those open air type of situations. There's a few communities that we know have higher rates, and I was on the phone and we had a meeting with COQUEBS yesterday, and Leah McRae, and the partnership with the City of St. Petersburg, and Dr. Davis, and church leaders, and Dr. Brinson, by the way, you mentioned him before. He's been making calls to all the church leaders and community leaders to say, how might we handle a positive case, and how might we continue to support our students and our families in some of our zip codes that have slightly higher rates or higher rates than other areas. As we move into this PowerPoint presentation and this documentation, we will cover a number of areas. We'll take a look at the student learning options selections. I will give you the latest data. We'll take a look at our transportation survey, an overview. We'll take a look at the instructional staff alternative assignments, and that's what we have some principles here. This is really a heavy lift, as I said in the past. We'll take a look at our MOU that our PCTA and our district and has agreed to. I've shared that with you, but we'll go through it, and we'll also go through with the master scheduling of teacher prep and the teacher preparation before the beginning of the schools. We'll take a look at the rules of masks that Mr. Kapersky and others have worked on, the safety protocols in our schools. And then probably the last thing that we are discussing now that's being worked on, and my understanding is that it will be a webinar this week possibly. I was in communications with the Department of Education, is a webinar on the positive case protocols. That's one of our last big things that is so critical, not only for Pinellas County. I was listening to some other shows in other states. They're dealing with the same exact thing, whether it's Indiana, Pennsylvania, Arizona, same exact thing. What if? What if, not almost what if, but when? When there's a positive case, what is it that we need to do? And that collaboration between the Department of Health and the school districts across this country. And then the preschool training, what will it look like? And Mr. Hendrick will review that. And then last but certainly not least, and I want to say this up front, I'm not trying to make this into a doom and gloom, but I believe I will always provide the most accurate information to this board so that you're best and well informed. And that is the financial implications of the emergency order that was granted to us that we've had in the press and other things. So I think there's a reality to that we need to be conscious of. And as a board member, I will never shy away from providing you information. Might not be the cheeriest stuff that you want to hear, but it is this is what I know as of today, and as of actually last night. So with that, let me get started. If I can find my slides on this, and thank you for putting up the overview of that. I was going more from memory, and my memory's still working, I see, so
Pretty well.
that's okay. So, Let's go into from July 27th. The next slide, please. One of the things we see is that we've seen somewhat of we had that default, right? And that if you don't respond at all, kind of like what I call your insurance or your others, you don't have to have 100,000 people respond, but if you know that if you don't respond, here's your action. And for many of us, that was the case. But even so, we double-checked, and schools were calling individuals and families. In particular, schools were calling that Pinellas virtual school. Not that we don't believe in Pinellas virtual school. It's an outstanding arena, but we wanted to make sure that our parents and our students understood that this was a 24/7. This was not we wanted to make sure they understood the components of the Pinellas virtual. Many of them, after a call, flipped and switched to, I really wanted my PCS online because I want that structure, I want that interaction with our teachers, and I want those things. So we see that what started out at the very end of July of about 63%, it's gone down to 55.5, 41.4, and then the 3.1's been relatively stable. This is not a bad sign. I mean, most districts across the state of Florida, as I work with the association, they're right around here or right around the 50%. I also would go out on the limb and say that our traditional might even go down a little bit, but also, as you remember, we also provided the families that, look, if you start with this My PCS Online and you're miserable and it is not working and nothing's, your family situation is, likewise, if you start with traditional and a situation arises in your household and you have a compromising situation and you really do need to flip, we just continue to say that this is not a convenience choice, but this is one that we will work with you. And schools and principals will use this as kind of like they do in high school or middle school, as a scheduling change. We're going to change your schedule. Can we? Where are we going to put you? It's not going to be just an automatic flip of a switch, but they'll use it as a scheduling change. Some of the things that in the next slide, what you'll see is that we had to wait until that choice was made for the major topic of conversation from the very beginning, right? How are you going to social distance on a bus? How are you going to social? Well, our district was always, we asked the doctors and they said, put a face mask on. And then let's hold tight and see, first of all, how many people are coming back to the brick and mortar of traditional schools. And then of those folks, how many people are going to choose to take the bus versus perhaps drive their own children or look at alternative ways? So I'm going to ask Mr. Herbeck to just go through this, and I want to thank the Transportation Department and Survey for looking at this. And you can see we're going to have a much reduced ridership.
So thank you, Dr. Grego. And to start off with, just to give you a little bit of context, in a normal year, we have about 41,000 students eligible for transportation, and we transport just under 30,000 of them. So about 3 out of 4 students, roughly, choose to take advantage of that. And we all know, too, that those 3 out of 4 students, they don't ride every single day. Sometimes families intend to transport students on their own. The car breaks down or something happens or a job hours change and a parent can no longer transport, and those students then revert back to the school bus, whether daily, weekly, or permanently. So we don't expect that to change, even during this environment. And I think it's very important, before I go any further, to say this, is that when we kind of discount the fact that the families who have chosen and indicated to us that they will not be riding the bus, they have not abandoned their seat. And I'll probably repeat that once or twice in the next couple of minutes. If something happens in their life and they need to have their child transported on the bus, their bus seat is still there. And I want to make sure that families understand that. So we put out a transportation survey a couple of weeks ago to about 53,000 families. As you can see there, about 8,300 responded, and right about down the middle, 50-50 on who's going to ride the bus and who's not. And when we took a look at that and we discounted those families from the survey who said that they would not be riding, and then we took away the families who are eligible for transportation who have chosen My PCS Online and chosen Pinellas Virtual, we've ended up with about 22,500 students eligible to ride compared to 41,000 in a normal year. So again, you start extrapolating out and you consider that maybe only about 3/4 of those 22,000 will be riding. Now you're down in that $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 or student number. We've taken a look at all 9,000 of our bus stops, and again, when we've taken those students out, we now have 1,300 of those 900 stops with no students. So that gives us the ability to adjust our runs, to help or plan for the overflow and for buses that have too many students on them. So right now, we have about 1,000 runs in the morning and about 1,000 runs in the afternoon. About 50% of those runs have 22 or fewer students assigned, which means that's one student per seat. Our buses have 11 rows and a seat on both sides of the rows. It means 22 seats. So again, about half of our buses have one student assigned right now per seat. The other half have between 22 and 44 students assigned per seat. So again, between 1 and 2 students per seat. And we have about 63 routes who have more than 44 students per seat. So what transportation has been doing since they've gotten these numbers back is they've been looking to balance those. They're starting with those 63 that could have more than 2 people per seat, and they're starting to use those routes that I mentioned earlier that have much fewer than 1 person per seat. We do have routes, and I don't have an exact number. They're down in 10, 11, 12 students. So we can take those routes and reassign them in a geographical area to help counter those 63 routes that look right now to be overcrowded. They will be continuing to do that for the next several days until we get basically a fairly consistent number across those bus routes. But it does look quite promising that we will be able to achieve social distancing to the greatest extent possible on those routes. And again, one of the things that I would caution everybody is this is not unlike any other year. We plan for routes and we plan for occupancy on those buses, and we don't know exactly how many are going to show up until day one because people change their mind at the last minute. I'm sure that's going to happen this year. So what they have done is they've held back some drivers to plan for overflow for those first couple days. So if we do have bus routes start filling up or runs start filling up in the morning, we have a system in place. The driver can call in and say, "Hi, I'm getting full. I may need some help at my last couple stops," because we'll know how many students may be at those stops, and we'll be able to send buses up there to the greatest extent possible. It won't cover every situation, but it will help on some of those runs.
Any questions on transportation before we move on to our next topic?
I know we talked about, I think I'm on. I know we talked about wiping down the seats and whatnot prior to, getting to the next stop for the new riders to get on. So you're accounting for that in time from getting from one bus stop to the next, or if the buses have a assistant on the bus, then maybe that assistant could do it, while the bus driver's driving, but we're accounting for that in time when we move from stop to stop.
Yes, and I'd also say we do have hand sanitizer on all the buses, but it's an excellent point you brought up. The assistant can do it, in a safe manner. We'd rather they not do it with buses moving, but they've gone so far as to even find that if you're the first bus in line and you're still wiping down and the next bus needs to go, how we can get the buses moving out of the bus ramps. Even going so far as, again, to find maybe a place down the street, a parking lot or something like that, where the drivers can pull in, wipe down before they pick up that next student. So we won't have, bus ramps at schools backed up because we're still wiping down buses.
And we talked about the potential for the plexiglass or whatnot between the driver and when the students are coming on. Are we?
We're not pursuing that right now. We're giving the drivers the PPE, just the masks, and giving them gloves and everything else as other employees have.
Okay. I would like for us maybe just to kind of keep that open because, we've had PSTA bus drivers that have the apparatuses and, of course, you don't know who's getting on.
Right.
But they still, unfortunately, contracted the virus. So if we could keep that as an open option, if we start to see movement or uptick or something of that
And we
nature.
can also use the face shields, or we can use goggles, safety glasses, things like that as well, that won't impede their vision.
Okay,
It's, highly important.
thank you.
Nicole?
So, one question I had was, in some situations or cases, a student is eligible to ride a bus because of their individual education plan, and we offer siblings a waiver to, will that still be an option for families, or is that going to be a case-by-case decision? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
What
in
I'm
those
asking?
situations, they're always case by case based on the occupancy of the bus, but this year, I'm sure it will be evaluated much more closely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And just the last thing for the board members to know, that we've kept our old routes in place. We've basically created a separate section in our routing software to run these reduced routes, so that if something happens and we start having families come back and they choose to come back to a brick and mortar school, we can go back really quickly to the routing in place. We shouldn't have much of a drop-off or a lag in creating new routes and making sure that extra students can ride if need be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Herbeck. And as you can see, board members, with the balancing of this, we'll see how it falls out, but it's encouraging, because when we first started, we're thinking about 3 kids or so, and now we're down, if we can balance it, when we eliminate 1,300 stops, also the speed of which we are getting from the first stop to the school is going to be tremendously decreased, which is going to add time in between the routes too for the cleaning and disinfecting of that bus. I want to move on to the another major topic, just to give the board an update on how we're doing with the possible alternative assignments, and move it to a human resources perspective now with Ms. Texel.
So good morning. And as you know, in order to serve our students either at their school sites face-to-face, or through Pinellas My PCS Online, or through Pinellas Virtual School, HR and all of the schools have been working with our instructional staff through a process to meet the needs of as many of our teachers as possible, while still providing that method of instruction, a delivery that was selected by our parents for their students. As you will see on this slide, it's just a timeline. As the students and families were making their learning options, our instructional staff were also submitting their requests for alternative assignments. And they all had the same due date of July 27th, and that's where it all culminated with that July 27th. We provided a link for the teachers to submit their requests or their responses to questions, such as the reason why they were requesting the alternative assignment, which I'm going to detail in a few moments. If they wanted to be considered for My PCS Online or Pinellas Virtual, or if they were anticipating taking a leave of absence or resigning or retiring prior to the start of the school year. So once all that information was gathered, HR worked with those employees who had indicated that they were submitting their requests due to either themselves having an underlying health condition, or that they were living with somebody who had an underlying health condition, in order to gather that necessary medical documentation. So you'll see that on there at the top, the middle column, the middle box, that they had that week until August 3rd to submit that documentation. And during the same time, you'll notice on the bottom that our instructionals, that our school data was being reviewed and master schedules were being updated by the schools based on those student responses to build those master schedules. So everything was kind of happening at the same time. Starting on August 4th, and I will tell you, continuing through today and through tomorrow, it is an ongoing process. Principals are working with their teachers in order to finalize those teaching assignments. And again, I'm going to talk about that a little more detail in just a couple of slides, but this pretty much gives you a timeline of where we have been over the past several weeks. On the next slide, we have some information. The graph shows how many teachers submitted requests for these alternative assignments broken down by category. So I'm just going to take a moment. I know we've talked about this before, but I just want to just recap it for everyone. The category 1, again, those are those employees with a documented underlying health condition. We had 292 of those teachers in category 1. I will tell you that that continues to be a fluid number because as we receive that medical documentation, those categories increase. So we have, but as of yesterday, we had 292 teachers in this category, and at that point yesterday, we had about 105 placed in a virtual position. I will tell you that has already increased to approximately 140 by now. So just in a day, as we continue to review processes and placements, we are continuing to work on that. We did meet with our principals yesterday to remind and to discuss the importance of making sure that we are doing whatever possible to assign these employees in this category to a virtual assignment due to their documented underlying health condition. I really do have every confidence that we will be able to increase this number. As I just mentioned, in 24 hours, it had already increased by another 30 or 40. And we are working very, very diligently to make sure that we have met the needs of this group of employees. And it should be noted that we had we had about 300 employees that requested the alternative assignment due to the health condition, but until they are able to provide that medical documentation, we have them listed in Category 4. So as soon as they come, that category moves up, and they're moved up into that Category 1. And as I said, they do remain fluid and due to these arrivals of the medical documentation. So placement will occur on an availability basis as well throughout this process. Category 2 is and it's a little small category, but those are our employees who are 65 years of age or older. And we had 33 requests for an alternative assignment. Yesterday at this time, we had 11 of them placed in a virtual position, but similar to Category 1, those have already increased as of yesterday, so this will continue to move forward. Category 3 are those employees who live with someone with an a documented underlying health condition. And out of those 110 employees, we have secured a virtual position for 35 of those employees. And Category 4 are those who were not comfortable returning to their school sites due to concerns regarding COVID-19. And as you can see, that is our largest category, just over 1,000 requesting that. We have had about 200 of those employees receive an alternative assignment. And I think you might say to me, Paula, why do you have 200 of those assigned and we're still working on our Category 1s? And it really depends on their site, their availability at their school site to have the virtual options. It's all based on the student responses and the needs of the students at the school. But again, we continue to work with those Category 1 and 2 employees to make sure that they have that virtual assignment. We are also continuing to work on placing teachers into Pinellas Virtual School. We needed to go through this first process to see if there was a position at their school site first. Then we were moving into Pinellas Virtual. I know we have already made about 3 or 4 assignments to that school, but that will take place this week. We really actually handed that list to Mandy Perry over at Pinellas Virtual, and she is going to be starting that process. We will be, of course, looking at our Category 1 and 2 employees first, and then moving to the other ones. And again, everything is based on certification, though, as well. I can't take a math teacher and put them into a science course, so it's also based on that. We've had we've had about 14 employees resign, and before the start of the school year, we've had about 10 employees retire. I already know one on the list, though, that had already planned on retiring, so I think there was just some mixed messages if I had to fill out the form. It's not a lot, it's 1 or 2 here or there. We've had 9 employees that have withdrawn their requests. I think that's kind of just another piece of data that we look at to do the virtual once they saw what plans were in place and so forth. And we have had 47 employees who are either on a leave of absence who are going to be returning or are requesting a leave of absence for the 2021 school year. So I say these numbers, and these are numbers as of 11:45 this morning because they change every single minute of the day as we work and getting our employees placed.
Paula?
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry. Of the Category 2, the 33, those are our employees that are 65 and older. Are we forcing them, or it's their choice? I mean, let's say they're 70 and they still want to teach.
Oh, so absolutely. These are the people who just actually who requested. So
Okay,
I will
okay,
tell
just-
you, we
okay.
had, I think I did the numbers, and I think it was almost like 50, 60 employees, but we only had 33 who requested.
Oh, okay,
So
that's what I wa-
absolutely not.
okay.
It was not a
Thank you.
forced
Sorry.
thing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Good question.
We don't discriminate when you're 65.
We also have the 5,500 people who did not make a request.
Thank
And
you.
then this morning, you were showing me a list of, there's a lot of people in Category 1, once they met with their principal, saw what their assignment would be, who said, you know what, I'm comfortable with that, and I'll just teach, 3 sections virtual and 3 sections with 10 or 15 students in my class face-to-face.
Right, so moving, absolutely, and that's going to come up a little bit in the next slide is, but I will just talk to it right now, because we do have a lot of our schools who, I spoke to a principal just this morning on the way into work, and they were mentioning, I have this one, because I'm checking on all these, right? We're all checking and making sure we've done our due diligence, and they said, Paula, they've got one face-to-face class, and it's going to be 10 students. They're fine with, they're good. They're good. They're going to do their virtual in their classroom, no students, and they've got the one face-to-face, and they're going to be there, and they're absolutely fine and okay with that. We want to make sure that they are okay. We are saying we will make sure we take care of you, but they're going, this is what I want to do. I'm certainly not going to tell a teacher they can't if they want to do that. So we're taking that into consideration.
I'm sorry, I have one more question.
Please.
When they say Category 1, virtual, is that at their home or is that at their school?
So it
does
could
it
be
depend
their
on their health?
option. Employees in categories 1, 2, and 3 have the option of, if they are 100% virtual, of doing that either in their classroom, because some people might want to do that because of the nature of their instruction and so
Giving
forth.
them the choice.
Or they can do it from home. So that's for categories 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, thank you.
Because I'm hearing differently.
Okay, Lisa?
I just had a quick question on Category 1. When it comes to the underlying health concerns while we're requiring documentation, how does this work with HIPAA laws, and is this all I just wanted to get clarification from Mr. Kapersky on HIPAA law with requiring that documentation.
Sure. This is obviously a voluntary application that the employers are making. As Ms. Texel noted, there are many people who, maybe not many, but there are some people who qualify for one or more of these categories who have chosen not to apply. So if they apply and seek this alternative assignment, they're doing it voluntarily, and so they're essentially consenting to us receiving that information in order to make that determination. Really no different than in a pre-COVID environment if somebody made a request for an ADA accommodation, which is really what this is for the category of 1, that they would give us medical certification. We would assess that and then try to come up with a reasonable accommodation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay. I'm going to try to do this with my mask on, but talking this much. The next slide, we will go on to talking about the process that was used for assigning the teachers to the MyPCS online units. We really needed 2 sets of information, and so this one is mentioning the student information that was needed, and this was based on the student choice. The number of PCS online units were then determined. The teaching and learning worked with the school leaders to finalize this information. The second is from our teachers, based on their teacher input. So we just wanted to make sure that we put that there. They were assigned to those 4 categories, and that's where the HR partners worked with the school leaders to finalize this information. And together, the leaders and the teachers used all this information to make the assignments. You'll see over there, we just wanted to share with you the information that was shared with school leaders on the various steps and the steps that were used to assign those. And again, we asked them to make those assignments in the orders listed below. So again, we talked about Category 1, Category 2, 3, and 4, which we just reviewed. But I will also put the caveat that assignments were made based on certification areas, right? So needed to keep that in mind. But once all the virtual assignments were filled at a school, and I will tell you, have been filled, they are in the works right now. They're still in the works, working with their schedules and so forth. Conversations were held with teachers who might have requested but did not receive that virtual assignment about their virtual options. And one of those first questions is, I don't have any more here at our school full-time, but are you interested in Pinellas virtual school? And those names were collected, and as I said earlier, those are being sent to Mandy Perry as today, as actually. But as of yesterday, just about 370 teachers have full-time MyPCS Online or have accepted positions with Pinellas Virtual. And I also wanted to note, just at the bottom left-hand corner, that, not all teachers requesting that alternative assignment will be able to obtain an alternative assignment. As we know, we had over 1,500 requests. We just don't have 1,500 full-time. But what we can do is try to work with our employees to make sure those that have concerns, that they live with someone who has an underlying, what protections can we take at the school site? What accommodations can we make for them in order for them to do their job, be there, and be healthy and safe at the same time?
Yeah.
Dr. Corbett?
Yeah, but we've also, Paul, I just want to make it clear, we've made a commitment that for everybody in category 1 and 2, we will work with them to find them a virtual position.
Yes.
It may not be what they're doing now. They may have to transfer schools, or they may have to work for Pinellas Virtual. They may have to teach something other than what they're doing right now, as long as they're certified. But we've made a commitment internally. We will find those positions.
Excellent. So we'll go to the next slide. I wanted to take a few moments and just review the memorandum of understanding that we have come into agreement with PCTA. I know that you received a copy of this approved MOU, but wanted to just take a few moments to go through some of the items that both parties agreed upon. But first of all, I want to thank all members of both bargaining teams, for their work. A few weeks ago, we spent many hours in great conversation, coming to an agreement, working through the various concerns in order to meet the needs of everyone, and very happy that it was fully supported by both groups. The first section of the MOU details that begin on page 2, highlights the various details surrounding the safety precautions that are being put in place. On section 1C, right away, it talks about the education that is going to be provided to all in regards to wearing face masks, using hand sanitizer, remaining socially distant. And I think the key word in there is that there will be education provided for everyone. And I know we're going to hear more about these topics later in the presentation this morning. But also in 1E, the employees and visitors will complete a self-screening tool to affirm their wellness each day. We've been doing that throughout the district this summer, and we are kicking off a new reboot of that just yesterday with our employees. And also making sure that we have listed in here that the district will inform and encourage our parents to conduct that self-screening for their child each day. In 1F, we already mentioned this earlier, but we had mentioned that we were talking about bus drivers and the ability to provide face shields. Well, teachers will also be able to get face shields upon request. And so we thought that was important, want to make sure we pointed that out. But we recognize that there's a need for some additional PPE for our staff who work with our smallest children or our students with exceptionalities. Therefore, we are going to provide face shields, gloves, and 2 sets of scrubs to those employees who are working in our pre-K, our VPK, our ESC self-contained units, and our centers. Employees will purchase these items, and then they will be reimbursed so that they can purchase those items that are more comfortable for them. And we'll have those school secretaries, the principals will be told about how to handle that paperwork at the school site. I know this is an agreement with PCTA, but I just wanted to let you know that we are currently finalizing our MOU with PESPA as well. So I know the question will come up about our support staff who work with these populations, and it's intended that that will be also agreed upon in the MOU for those support staff. So down to 1J talks about meetings at schools will be held virtually to the greatest extent possible. One thing we always talk about is what are the options that we can do to make sure we maintain social distancing. And so we want to make sure that that was put in there. And of course, if it isn't possible, that we do maintain social distancing and that masks are worn. 1K talks about the discusses the procedures that we will follow when an employee or a student exhibits positive symptoms or symptoms of COVID-19 or test positive, and that they will be made available and they will be shared. We're actually going to be talking about that process a little bit later on in our presentation, so we'll be sharing that. So the next section does discuss the criteria for assignment to MyPCS Online. We agreed to the process for assigning teachers to MyPCS positions, which was shared just a little bit ago. So this section just does go through it and describes that, as well as talks about some Canvas training that is required in order to successfully implement this type of instruction. And I know Mr. Hendrick will most likely be discussing a little bit on this later on in the presentation. But the whole section does talk about examples such as the Canvas training. Also in section 8, it talks about the class sizes, and that class sizes do not apply to virtual instruction and that those class sizes may be larger. However, we recognize the concern with just saying it can be whatever. So we have put in there for our core classes that the numbers in MyPCS Online should not be over 28 in K3, 32 in 4-8, and 35 in high school. And those are for our core classes, except in those unusual circumstances. There's always an exception. I never say never, and I never say always. But those are the guiding the guiding numbers that we will follow. In section 9, it just points out that there may be a time where a teacher has to self-isolate. Maybe one of their family members tests positive. It's not tied to a class setting. And so there might be an opportunity for a teacher to continue their instruction virtually with having either a substitute or a paraprofessional, somebody covering the class while that instruction goes on. Listen, anything is available, anything is an option. I think we're all thinking outside the box. Not saying that that might be typical, but it might be. So we just might be an option, so we put that in there. But I also appreciate us putting in there because I wanted to just share with the board that we have been looking ahead and being a little proactive and talking about our other very important employee group, which are our substitutes. And I know the question the last several months just in my world has been, you know, how do we take care of those employees? And when we talk about having a cohort and keeping people in a cohort at a school and you have a substitute who's traveling from school to school, is that really the best? So we've assigned a school-based sub to each site. And this is a daily sub who will just be assigned to that one school. They will report there. If there is a substitute that is needed, they will fill in for that. If not, I am sure there will be other duties that they can assist around the school. But that is to keep that, first of all, that substitute in one area, but also not so they're not going around into different. Now, will I say that we won't need other subs? We possibly will. But if we can maintain, you know, one at a school, that would be great. Some of our schools we will also assign two to, just based on the number of subs over the past several years that they've needed. So we're going to look at that as well. So moving on to the next section, does talk about our one-year leave option and our modification to our sick leave bank. And so we recognize and we understand that not all teachers may be able to secure that alternative assignment. Some of them may just not feel comfortable returning to their school sites. And so therefore, we're offering the one-year unpaid leave for the 2021 school year. This will be for the balance of the school year, so it won't roll over to 21-22. So if it comes up in the next week and it's August 20th that you put in, it's not going to roll over to the 21-22 school year. The employee's position at their school will not be held, but the position in the district will be held. So we will have them on board for the 21-22 school year. And also, if the employee is on an annual contract, that will be automatically renewed. So they won't have any repercussions for that. And we are just about finished with finalizing the revisions to the guidelines for the sick leave bank. And this gives me an opportunity to mention the sick leave bank because I think some people have some questions or maybe aren't even aware that we have a sick leave bank. But we do, and it's available to assist employees who are experiencing a debilitating illness or involved in an accident which delays his or her ability to continue with their duty. Currently, the guidelines for the sick leave bank state that the employee needs to exhaust their sick days, and they need to be without pay for 5 days before withdrawing from the sick bank. So we are revising those guidelines just specifically for COVID. So our regular guidelines will be in place, but we're adding a separate guidelines for COVID issues, so that members of the sick leave bank will have the ability to withdraw up to 10 days out of the sick leave bank if they have that, if they are continuing to experience issues with COVID. They won't have to exhaust their sick days, and they will not have to wait 5 days without pay.
Yeah, may I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Is this going to be used before or after the 80 hours?
After.
After. okay.
After.
All
So,
right.
and so the next section talks about the emergency paid sick leave.
Yeah.
And that is the first thing. If an employee experiences symptoms of COVID and they are seeking a diagnosis, or if they have tested positive, the first thing that they do is first we ask, can they work remotely? And if they can't, then we go ahead and they can earn up to 80 hours of sick leave. That would be the first thing we would do. And then the concern came up if they still had not recovered from their illness. And that's when they could submit a request from the sick leave bank to do that. And I will tell you, there is a committee of 3 members of PCTA, 3 members of the district who will review those requests and sign off on that.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Nicole?
Where does short-term disability play a role in this? So when it comes time for me for open enrollment, would it be advantageous for me to enroll in short-term disability? Or can you talk a little bit more to what the options are with short-term disability and if that would impact or support our staff in any way?
So I will get that information and share with you on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Can I, just because I deal with the short-term disability, I'm sorry, through my full-time job, short-term disability doesn't kick in until you have exhausted all of your other financial resources. So in this situation, it would be through, and this is per insurance, it would be through
Yeah.
the 80 plus any additional if they got the bank. Then they would submit the documentation to the insurance company for short-term disability for 6 weeks, 33 1/3% of the salary. I don't believe we have long-term disability insurance as a part of our insurance packet. So I don't think we do. I don't know, we may or may not.
I'm going to
but-
put that I'll get that all put together
yeah,
for you.
but
So,
that's typically the process. You have to have exhausted. You can't have like sick time or vacation time that you can pull from and apply for short term. You have to have nothing on the books.
Yeah.
And then you can get the short-term disability, 66 2/3, I'm sorry, I said 33, 66 2/3 of your, whatever your salary is, that runs for 6 weeks. And then if you have long-term or something after that it goes into FMLA, which guarantees job placement, but no financial benefit.
And that's what the concern was with the group, is that,
Yes.
Having to exhaust their, so, and I will tell you.
Not trying to be HR, I'm sorry.
No.
Just,
No, thank you,
I
Flowers.
negotiate that with.
Thank you. But I will tell you that the sick leave bank is up and running by our employees. It is a sick leave bank that that an employee can contribute that 1 day of sick leave, and it goes into a bank for those people who may need it. So that's another great thing.
That's good.
So that does, and again, it talks about the emergency paid sick leave, which goes into section 17. And we
Just a
want.
minute.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, just keep it, when you're
Oh,
done,
you're
I
fine.
have some questions. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm almost quite done right
Okay,
here with
no
this
problem.
section, so, but that's okay. But it does, we wanted to put in here that the, describes the leaves under our Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, so that everybody has the details from that information right in there. And I will tell you, this has been in place since April, and it does set to expire December 31st, barring any other agreements there. But again, we wanted everybody to see that right here in our MOU. Does she wanna-
Okay, I have a couple questions. First of all, we talk about the PPE for the K and the ESC. I've been getting a lot of emails from teachers, middle school and high school, that want to wear scrubs, and they were told by, I guess, in the MOU that wasn't one of the things discussed. I actually wrote back to them and said, why scrubs? What they said, it makes sense. You gotta wash your clothes in hot water. And I know, like, what I have on, I can't. A lot of us in certain clothes, especially women, I think more women than men, but they also feel it's like an extra layer of protection.
Sure. Yep.
How are we gonna handle that?
So that has come up in the last 24 hours, really. So, but yes, if teachers would like to wear scrubs, they are going to be allowed to wear scrubs. We are providing the scrubs for those that were mentioned in the MOU.
Right, but not for the others. It's, if they feel that strongly, then they will have to go and purchase.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. That's the first one. Now, the other one, coverage. When we used to have teachers out and we couldn't have, or we had one sub assigned to our school, are we going to ask guidance counselors, social workers, and psychologists to cover? Because I think that might run into a problem. I'm just thinking right now with this epidemic and how children are handling it, that's going to be a big, that's going to increase their workload.
Right.
So if we're saying to them, fill into the classroom,
So.
or saying to teachers, okay, you've got planning period, will you go cover?
Right.
Isn't that against the contract? I don't
So-
know, I'm just,
So there is nothing that states another member of this unit can assist with coverage and whatnot. However, we will tell you absolutely, Ms. Long, that, and as a principal, I think we've got lots of principals sitting here, that is not our first go-to. We do everything possible to not have to pull certain employees, because they do have, every employee that you ask to go cover, we're taking away their duties.
something else,
So
right.
everybody's job is important, everybody's duties are important, but I don't think, and as a former principal, I could not say that I might not need to pull them at some point. The challenge that our administrators will need to be dealing with is also sometimes if I didn't want to pull my counselor to cover a class, I could separate the class, right? I could split.
right.
We're kind of in a different atmosphere right now. Like you can't take 5 more students and add to a class that might be socially distanced and appropriate. So
true.
with that being said, I don't think there is an administrator out there that's their first choice. But if I have a class that needs coverage, and don't get me wrong, I think I've covered classes too as an administrator. I mean, because
Yeah, I
we
have
do.
too.
Everybody
I know.
steps up, and I think the mantra that we're all talking about today is, listen, everything is changing a little bit this year, and the idea of working together and to support our students who need it. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and say it may never happen, but it's not going to be the first line of
Okay.
who am I going to go to, but it might be. And then, so I think those decisions have to be made at a school-by-school, case-by-case basis.
Okay. I
They
just
also
wanted to
do
check.
know that we have talks with, we're constant communication with our principals, so if there seems to be an issue it seems to be a daily occurrence, we'll work with them on that, and maybe we need to put another sub at the school. We'll work with that. Again, that's not typically what we do, but I know I'm in a different position right
Now,
now.
these subs that we're going to have for every school, are they paid regardless if they teach or not?
They will be.
So we're
and that's-
adding additional personnel sort in a way, because we do,
I-
that increases, but that's regardless, because at least we have somebody
I'm sure-
on every campus.
There's gonna, I think you talk to any school, there's
always
always the
policy.
need for it. Yeah.
Okay, but like
Which
if
I
it's-
hope will prevent what you are exactly asking about
Let's say
with calling those
you
people.
got Osceola High and Osceola Middle, because they're really close together. If Osceola Middle doesn't need the sub,
Right.
and Osceola High needs 2 that day, we could transfer the sub across the street.
I think that might be, I think we'd have to look at it case by case. The
Okay,
point of
I'm
keeping the
just
sub
trying to
within is
cover-
that cohort in, so then we're going different schools. But I think anything is possible, and we never
Okay.
say never.
Okay, sorry.
You're fine, no, that's a great,
Okay.
great
In
question.
some schools, it's going to be a cost neutral, the way we look
Yes.
at it, because there's rarely in larger schools that there's not one person.
Yeah.
But to your point, Mrs. Long, if there's a neighboring school that has it, and principals have such a good relationship with one another, using your
Same
sub, I
family.
need one, and so.
Yeah.
Because even beyond that school-based sub, if there's another one, there's going to be somebody traveling too. So this is all, as Paul is emphasizing, this is truly a new world in terms of what we're doing. But what we're not going to do is split and increase class sizes.
Right.
That has to be
Right.
our goal this year, is to keep class sizes extremely low.
So
Lower we keep
teachers will
class sizes.
not be adding to their classes
We're
or?
going to do
Okay.
everything so that we keep social distancing. So we got to lead with safety. And safety is going to be defined as keeping the class-teacher ratios lower so that we can have that social distancing with the mask. So if we just pile in 10 more students, we might have solved one problem, we create another one. And
Right,
that's kind
and
of the
more
world that
dangerous
we're
possibly.
living in.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I have one more question in this area. We have asked a lot of questions based on the email that we're
Yes.
receiving, so that there would be some clarification. So obviously, not everyone's reading the MOU. How can a teacher access the MOU? Will every single one of them be given the MOU?
Very good question, and that's a very good point. I will jot that note down, and we will share that with principals to send that out to to their employees with their welcome back
Or, yeah, or even
information.
if it's on the website somewhere, it's their
It is,
responsibility
it's-
to read
yeah.
it, but we need to make
Yep.
sure it's available.
Available, perfect. I do have two more sections on there, just, I think they're quite important.
Thank you.
The evaluations is the next section, and I think it was brought up earlier today as well in our meeting, that we definitely recognize that the certain portions of our Marzano-focused model may or may not apply to now the way of the work right now, and needs to be reconsidered for all teachers. So we are reconvening the Appraisal Advisory Committee and to further discuss those. And so we will work together as a team to make any adjustments. And I know we're looking at beginning of September to have that meeting. We've got to get through the first couple weeks of school, and we'll get that team back together and provide some recommendations. So we fully recognize that it may look different this year.
Who makes up that team? Are there teachers, administrators?
Absolutely. It's a pretty large group
Okay.
of all teachers, administrators, district staff. Yep.
Is a school board member on there?
Ooh. Does anybody sit on that?
I
think-
volunteer.
I'm not sure. It's, oh, wonderful. Excellent. I'm going to mark your name down, Ms. Long.
I'm just asking, not trying to knock you, Miss Eileen, but legally, can we be
Oh, all right.
on that? Because that
Because I have
team
to vote, never mind.
dictates the evaluation process, which is not our realm.
No,
Not
I
trying
agree.
to, not trying to knock you.
I know, I rescind, I take
yeah.
it back.
I would recommend that a board member not be on that committee.
Okay.
But
Thank
we
you.
will
Thought
keep you
about it.
informed of.
I'm going to law school
once we
next.
meet.
No, I'm
We
just
will.
kidding.
He has his hand up.
Okay, and Bill Dudley has his hand raised.
Oh, I think that's who's.
Mr. Dudley? Question? Unmute your microphone.
There we go.
Hey,
All right. I just had a question. Again, I apologize for the not being there, and my had a medical issue with a member of my family, and so it happened at the last minute. So I apologize, but I am listening. I got a question from a teacher who said if an employee decides not, to take the year leave of absence, will they be able to, earn money? Can they find another job? Is that in violation of the contract or?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Dudley. That question has come up, and if an employee is on a leave of absence, they are not permitted to receive full-time compensation, or else it just
forfeit the job.
breaks the contract requirements with the district. So that is for no full-time compensation.
Okay, thank you.
If they
So
resign,
they
they
can find a
resign.
job elsewhere, but they can't earn as much money as they would have
It's a
otherwise?
full-time,
Yeah,
it's
it's a
full-time
part-time
compensation.
job.
Right.
Okay. Interesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just wanted to just reiterate, we talk about the duration and the assurance of continued communication. I want to just assure everyone that, as we've said throughout this whole entire discussion, that this is an evolving situation. We recognize that communication is greatly needed during this time. District and PCTA leadership have already talked about setting up regular, and we have had regular communication, and we will continue to have that to just maintain that. And just knowing that this MOU remains in effect only so long as the emergency order is in effect, and at the very latest, the end of the 2021 school year. And the last piece that was on this bullet, and I know Mr. Hendrick will probably be speaking to this a little bit more, but the simultaneous teaching has also been an area we have been in discussion, and just the making sure we all understand the process or the goal that can be achieved through simultaneous instruction is to make sure that we're maintaining those lower TPRs in the class in that face-to-face setting. As we always are looking at our employees who are requesting that alternative assignment, we also are making sure those 5,500 or so teachers who are in our sites and doing that face-to-face instruction have the ability to have that socially distant classroom as well, or students placed in that socially distanced area. But I know we'll continue to have discussions about that. So that wraps up the MOU. Sorry that took so long, but I think those were some great points that we definitely wanted to make sure we shared.
I have a question.
Yes, Nicole?
So for number 8, talks about class size.
Yeah.
How does that work with simultaneously teaching? So let's say, for example, I recognize how complex the master schedule is. There are so many singletons, especially at the secondary level, where you might have to be teaching a class and simultaneously teaching my PCS students. So you're face-to-face and teaching online. It says 28 in the my PCS, and we're
Right.
trying to keep the simultaneously or the face-to-face low. How many could potentially I be a teacher who has 28 my PCS students, and I'm simultaneously teaching 12 kids?
No.
Face-to-face?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
No.
So
it'd be-
if I'm teaching, how many could I end up with?
Regular.
Regular
we would
class size,
Yeah,
22?
regular.
We would combine them and
in
use our ranges that
intermediate
we use.
and-
I'm sorry,
We're going to walk through some
Yeah.
examples, Dr. Carr, in just a
Okay.
moment, and I think it'll become clear.
But I think that it's a really good point, a good question. The simultaneous was the original class roster. We're not adding any students to
Right.
that class roster
Right.
to inflate that number at all.
Right.
So, you know, we default back to the class size because simultaneous is a live instructional. What it does is it tremendously drives down the number of students in the class. So those numbers that were given before, 28, 32, and 35, that's only pertains to a straight My PCS online,
Correct.
not a simultaneous. And I think that's really important for the general public to hear too.
But so just to clarify, if I'm a teacher and I teach 5 periods at a high school, and I'm sure you'll get into this granular level in that next explanation, and I maybe was one of those category 1 individuals, but my principal's unable, or APC, is unable to get my numbers low enough because of singletons. I might be teaching 2 my PCS classes and 3 face-to-face. So potentially the my PCS classes at the secondary level might say, those 2 classes are going to be 35 kids. So then I have 75 online. And then I'm going to have my face-to-face as well. So my student-teacher ratio is going to go up if I'm splitting, right?
Well, based
Because-
on the example you gave, Dr. Carr, if you're talking about a singleton teacher, all right, and we'll actually share one of those in a minute. So you have, let's say, 150 students, okay, in a high school. We're going to rearrange those, and you're still having the same 150 students. 35 and 35 may be in my PCS online, and your 4 face-to-face may be 15 apiece, so that we can lower the number of students in front of you at any given time. The design is not to say, let's have your face-to-face at the same level, and now let's give you more students in the My PCS Online. The My PCS Online and the Simultaneous are used to drive down the numbers. Now, for a teacher who's completely My PCS Online, yes, they will have more, and that's
Right.
part of the MOU. And in fact, as we'll talk about, they could end up and agree to do even more than that. Because as we all know, those are nice round numbers, but the breakage doesn't always come out that way. I mean, everything is not done in groups of 28 and 32 and 35. So we'll show some of those examples. Is it possible that someone could have more students than what they had 4 weeks ago? It's possible, but those are conversations that school leaders are having with teachers to lay down and say, let's look at what our options are. I will also say, I know I've heard from plenty of teachers, and the principals can speak to this as well, those master schedules evolve every hour. And so someone goes in, I know I spoke to a teacher yesterday, oh my gosh, I've got 200 kids now, right? Exactly what you're talking about. Well, the school has to build new sections before they can take the old sections away.
Right.
So those things happen, and every time a parent, a student, someone calls in and takes up 20 or 30 minutes of the principal's time doing that, it slows down that process. So we've tried to say, we'll have your assignment by the 13th, and we will have that, as Paula talked about, but the process to get there gets a little muddy, and sometimes people panic on that sense.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, good,
We're
thank
moving
you.
into the next area. Board members, were there any other questions? I'm sorry.
What about support staff?
Oh, thank you. Yes, we are, we will be getting information out to the support staff. Again, like I said, we are just finalizing our MOU with PESPA. I was hoping to get to them with them yesterday. Schedules did not allow, so in the next couple days, we will get with them and then share that information with PESPA. We will also be working through a process for any of our members of our support staff who may have concerns about returning to work. It will not be a situation similar to this, although, because we're working on just a more streamlined way of working with our support staff and giving and seeing what is available for them. So as soon as we have that, we will also share that with you.
But we know how many category twos we have, right? We haven't, I mean, that's.
We do, and I
should have
think,
a-
and
And it was pretty high?
I think so. I don't have that at the top of my head this morning, but we will work with them, and the question has to be, and remember, the request for a possible alternative assignment was the process we used with our instructional staff. We also need to ask that same question of our support staff, and we need to look at what are the possible alternative assignments. I think we've shared before, a bus driver, I'm not sure what an alternative, is there a remote assignment for a bus driver? So we will have to work with those employees to determine what might be available for them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Our next section, we want to dive into the preparation of the instruction and the scheduling. And I know that we haven't formally introduced, but let me take a moment to introduce Ms. Kathleen Young-Parker, principal at Campbell Park, Mr. Danny Bellaris, principal at Safety Harbor Middle School, and Mr. Brett Patterson, principal at Palm Harbor, at Pinellas Park High School. Thank you. It starts with a P, but Pinellas Park High School, so thank you, Brett. So with that, Mr. Hendrick, thank you for all that you're doing. This is, the board members, this part here, just hang on. I mean, this is truly a heavy lift in terms of the scheduling and things. And let me add one thing. As I search out other districts of how they're doing it, let me remind ourselves and everyone else listening that we're doing it we're not doing it the easiest way. We're doing it a way to try to lead with the employees. The easy way I'll share with you after Mr. Hendrick goes through some that continues. It's that simultaneous teaching for everybody. But we'll take a look at it, and this is really an interesting portion of the presentation. So, Mr. Hendrick?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Grego, and good morning, board members again. The principals will join me here in just a second, but I want to go through a couple slides to give you an overview. So when we talk about preparing for instruction online and simultaneously face-to-face, you know that you've made an investment in PCS Connects, and part of that is the Canvas Learning Management System. We, as part of the MOU, offered training to teachers, and over 6,000 have already begun that training. 4,500 have finished the training. In fact, we sent out a reminder this morning to teachers to remember to go in and do their PLN survey so that they can finish the course. That investment in training for Canvas is a long-term investment. Remember, we are building out the opportunity for all students to have a device at home, and teachers will be able to use the resources that they're creating now long-term. Yes, there's a real short-term need. We know that school's going to begin in 14 days, 13 days, but we want to make an investment for the long term. So the training is built so that it's introductory. There's a ton of links and additional things to go look at that you could spend days working on, but really we want to get them up to speed so they can begin this process of helping to make that transition and really think about ways, we say this in the training, when all of this is over and students in your class have a device, how can you use these tools to better your instruction? And so yes, there's a short-term need, but we want to do the long-term one as well. We did have the first meeting of our Parent and Community Advisory Board as part of PCS Connects. I sent you an update on that a couple of weeks ago, but I want to thank Dr. Valerie Brim and the members of the community that participated. It was a really great group of parents, grandparents, community members who told us things that our teachers had told us before, but they told it from a parent perspective. things like we need consistency and structure for our students when you return virtually. Classes need to look similar across across a middle school or across a high school. We heard about training for parents, training for students, availability to go to school if we need help. So it was a really rich discussion for our parents and grandparents and community members, including municipalities who joined us for that conversation. So we have built out the resource center, as you see on the right side of the screen here. Those resources have been built by teachers and teaching and learning staff to build resources for digital instruction just the same way that we do for face-to-face instruction. So as teachers start to log into their Canvas courses, we've applied a template, a district-wide template for grade bands so that they do look similar, and then they can pull those resources in. So just like they use curriculum guides that we've produced for years, and it has text and questions and quizzes and all those things, those same resources have been built in Canvas so that they can then pull them into their course. And now they have them, and now they can decide which ones they want to use and how they want to make them better or slightly change them or use this text instead of that text. They'll always have that flexibility, but we tried to build out those resources so they are not creating them from scratch. And that's in all classes. That's in PE, that's in the arts, that's in digital technology. So it's across the board as they prepare and look at these courses. I know a big part that board members have asked about is training for parents. We have a number of trainings that we'll be rolling out for parents, and on August 17th, we'll make our website live so that parents can log in and do that. As has been mentioned, as teachers change assignments and students change classes, every time a change occurs in focus, a subsequent change occurs to the resources available to them. And there's a nightly sync that then links all of that back up. So to have those things on this week, it's obviously our teachers have access, but it can be a little frustrating for any user who one day I see this and tomorrow, because my assignment has changed, I see a new set of classes or circumstances. All of those things can be fixed and migrated and linked together. But for parents and students, we want to get closer to what a schedule actually looks like before they get in and start to see what that actually is. The parent training I'm excited about because it's actually in Canvas. So parents can log into Canvas and see it, and then it walks them through. And there's a number of videos. I shared one of the videos with board members last week. That's one of about 4 or 5 that are in there. And then we've also created our own videos that will be separate from that, that shows them the templates that students will interact with as they take the classes. We also shared with schools principals earlier in the week that they have the opportunity to call parents into school if they need to do small group sessions. They also have the opportunity, and we encourage this more so, to do live sessions online. And we provided them with instructions to do that through Microsoft Teams. They also can use their TV studios and broadcast just like we are doing now. So there's a number of ways for them to hold parent trainings, which again, we didn't do in the spring. That just wasn't where we were as a community at that point. So we're excited about the training for parents. It'll go live next week. And yes, there's also training for students in a similar way that their teachers will do with them when they return to school. So if we can go to the next slide and talk about the preparation for instruction and get a little more detailed on how master schedules have been built. So we have been really, really clear as a school district that the number one goal is health and safety for everyone. Not just health and safety for teachers in categories 1 and 2 that Ms. Texel was talking about, but for the 5,500 teachers who said, I'll return to work, even though maybe I have some questions, but I will return to work and I want to be safe. And so the goal is to drive down the number of students in every single classroom so that there's the fewest number. And so we gave our principals some targets of 15, 18, and 20, and you can see the grade level bands there, to try to reduce the number of students in each class to that number so that they can be more socially distanced. Those aren't hard caps. Those weren't negotiated as part of the MOU. Those are us saying that's a really good practice and something to shoot for. And in most cases, we're going to see that occur as a reality. Of course, the size of a classroom impacts that, right? A really large classroom, you can have more. A really small classroom, you're going to have fewer. But that's been our goal, and our school principals and assistant principals, as they rework the master schedules, have been doing that. As was just mentioned, the targets for my PCS online classes of 28, 32, and 35, those are in the MOU, and as Mrs. Texel said, There are times when teachers look and say, you know what, I don't mind having 31 students in the class because that's all of the students in the grade level, and it makes no sense to put 3 kids with somebody else when I can just take those 3, right? And those are the kinds of things that happen anyway in a regular master schedule. We have class size, but we look across averages. So one of the key things to bring down that average is the simultaneous teaching. And so what that is real simply, you're instructing students who are in front of you and also those who are on the computer at home, MyPCS Online. And especially in secondary schools where you may be the only one who teaches Chinese or Latin or Greek or that level of advanced placement computer science, you can either create situations where you have standalone MyPCS Online classes and then face-to-face classes, or you can lower those numbers by making simultaneous classes and spreading those out across multiple classes. So one of the things about simultaneous teaching, and certainly we've talked to lots of teachers about it, is it can appear to be scary, right? How do I do both things at the same time? I signed up to teach face-to-face, or I signed up to teach MyPCS Online. How am I able to do that? So we've provided some instructions, and I left for you board members a draft of a MyPCS Online instructional guide that we will be releasing tomorrow so that teachers have it when they return to work officially on Thursday. And in the MyPCS Online guide, we go through and talk about a number of items, and I just want to highlight a few for you, starting on page 4, which talks about the public web page and the Canvas resources that we have available, and make sure that our teachers are aware of all the supports that are there. They have become so familiar with our digital learning team, Dr. Kana Colosi and the folks that are doing our trainings all summer, and they have built out a SharePoint site for Canvas with all of the resources, tips and tricks and videos that teachers need to be successful. Also on page 4 towards the bottom, really important, we mentioned this a couple months ago when we made the Canvas purchase, but there's a 24/7 hotline that teachers can call to get help with building out Canvas pages, or if they have questions. I lost something. I don't know how to turn this on. I don't know what I'm, here or there. Because it can be frustrating to call the district or to send an email and you don't know when you're going to get a response. This they can call anytime, 24/7, 7 days a week, and they're doing that, and they're getting responses. So it's not just a burden on 5 or 10 trainers across the district to help teachers, but literally the whole company of Canvas being able to help teachers all the time. So that's a really important thing, and we're excited to have that resource for teachers. On page 5, we have guidance for families and students who run into technical assistance problems, and there's it's something in the appendix we'll show that goes along with that. But the web pages to build out for these will have all of those steps, and our teachers are also able to help students in terms of resetting passwords and things like that. On pages 6 and 7, we give guidance on live lessons, how to hold those live lessons, the frequency, the time, all of those things. But having said that, in the MOU, it does talk about teachers will run those lessons at their discretion. So we've given some help and guidance, but none of them are absolutes. So today's direct lesson may only be 10 minutes, tomorrow's maybe 30 minutes, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be, as long as you're communicating with your students, that's fine, but we give some guidance here for you. On page 8, a lot of questions have come from families and schools around textbooks and other supplies. Remember, again, students can go to school and get a textbook. We've purchased the textbook for all students, so they can set up times to go in and get those books if they would prefer to have that hard copy of their math book or hard copy of their English book. Most of those are also online, but they are certainly able to go in and get those resources. Attendance is also called out in here, and a big change in attendance, I wanted to make you aware, it's bolded on page 9, is that unlike the spring, because we expect a lot more structure in daily attendance, period by period, attendance will be taken every day, not within a 3-day window, which was the case in spring when you could kind of log on whenever you want. There's certainly that structure and higher level of expectation in terms of attendance. Moving on to page 9, we talked earlier, or page 10, I'm sorry, we talked earlier about assessments in the workshop. We intend on having assessments at home, those progress monitoring checks. Yes, health and safety leads the way, but we still are an academic institution, and we need to make sure that students are progressing on the standards at each grade level. And so we'll give instructions for teachers on how to do that. A lot of them did that in the spring, so it's not that difficult. Page 10 and 11 talks about substitute plans. As that conversation just unfolded a few minutes ago about what happens if someone's not there, one of the challenges is what happens if the teacher's not there and now I have a substitute? How do they access all that other, they can't run that simultaneous lesson at the same time. So we need to make sure we have robust substitute plans. That's a normal function that teachers do all the time. So we've shown them how to do that. You simply build it in your Canvas course, and then an administrator, the library media technology specialist can go in and just activate that so the simultaneous students or the MyPCS Online students have that at home. Now, if it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 days, then obviously you can set the teacher up. But if I'm just having someone go in on the last second, we need to have those resources available, and that'll be there within Canvas to do so. Page 13, we get into supports for ESOL and ESE students. There is a companion guide for students with disabilities. It'll be linked on here. The whole document is not here. But obviously, as we heard earlier in the policy discussion this morning, there's lots of questions about supporting students with disabilities. And Lynn Mowat and her team have outlined all of those for teachers and families to have access to those supports. On page 14, we talk about simultaneous teaching. And really, again, I just want to kind of start simple. When we started in the spring, we asked teachers to not try to do too much with live lessons. If you remember, we said, start with like one a week and record yourself first before you try to turn the cameras on and do all these other things. Well, they're familiar with that now, right? But as you get into simultaneous, what we're asking you is, this doesn't need to be a production where I'm walking around the room and I've got multiple cameras and I've got microphones and all these other things, right? We taught Summer Bridge sitting in front of the computer live the whole time. I see the students, they see me, they see my screen. That's all you have to do for simultaneous teaching, right? So if I'm projecting on the board, the students in my classroom can see it, the students at home can see the same thing. They can see me in front of the computer, I'm talking. Now there's a lot more advanced ways where you can have students navigate chat rooms and have students interact both at home and at school, even like for a science lab. We could run the science lab in class and I can partner you up with someone at home. They can see what's going on and now you two can talk about the chemical reaction or the physics part of that lesson. So there's ways to do things that are advanced, but start with the easy part, which is share your screen, sit in front of your computer, and do what you've done in the spring and in the summer to do that. We also talk about using Canvas as the go-to place. That's actually the #1 recommendation, so that you're not creating multiple things for your students at home and in the classroom. So this guide, and you can flip through, the very last page is just a infographic on how to support students at home if they have questions of technology. Wanted to share this with you, board members, because this resource will be for all teachers who are teaching any students in MyPCS Online, either full-time or simultaneously. And then lastly, the last bullet on this slide before we get to some of the school options is to know that these things are ongoing, these master schedule recreations, and we want to show you some of those. And as Ms. Texel just alluded to, as we build out and make sure all of those teachers in Category 1 are taken care of, if today we say, well, this chemistry teacher at a high school who was a Category 1 teacher, we moved them to Pinellas Virtual, we now have a chemistry vacancy at that high school. And it's August 11th, right? Chemistry teachers aren't easy to find. So that creates another dynamic that is troublesome as you do this. So it is moving. And so let's jump to some examples. Ms. Long?
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
just a real
let's-
quick question. Does every single classroom in Pinellas County now have a smart board?
Yes, referendum has funded that. Now, could there
Okay.
be one or two here or there? Perhaps, but we can provide a projector, but every room does have one.
Okay, so every classroom will have what's necessary to do this?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Are there any other questions of what we've heard so far? Okay.
All right, let's jump
continue.
into some examples. I'm going to invite, this is Kathleen Young-Parker, up as well. She's going to go to the podium. And so let's look at Campbell Park. The first thing we know is students made selections for MyPCS Online. And so her staff looked at that and said, how many students chose MyPCS Online? How many students then are still face-to-face? And they built out, and every school did this, at every grade level and in every subject. So we're going to talk about, right now, elementary school, but every time I say first grade, second grade, third grade, you can think math, science, social studies in a secondary school, because that's what they had to do, the same thing. So they took a look, what's our enrollment? How many sections or how many units? This is really how many teachers we have at that grade level. And then across, how many are in MyPCS Online, how many are in face-to-face, and then how do we make that work? So I'm going to show you a first grade example in just 1 second. But one of the things you might notice, and this is always the case, right? We go from 3rd grade to 4th grade. We have fewer units even though we have more students. That's because the TPR, right? The class size limit goes up there. And you'll notice that it's never perfect, right? You might say, well, we need another teacher in that grade level, but we have fewer students in kindergarten right now and a lot of teachers. So maybe we move a teacher to 4th grade who was in kindergarten. Also of note is that kindergarten just across the district, because it's the first time they're registering, there's a lot of paperwork, you have to have shot records. So that has been lagging, and schools are getting kindergartners in as they've returned to full-time work this week. So let's go to the next slide if we can, and take a look at 1st grade and actualize some of these. So we had 88 students in 1st grade at Campbell Park. So what are our options? So one option is to say, let's do simultaneous teaching across all of the teacher units at that particular school. And in the 5th unit here, this was a brand new teacher. This will be her first year as a teacher. And so as Kathleen met with her teachers, they developed one option that says, let's have 8 students face-to-face, let's have 10 or 11 at home, and let's let our brand new teacher, our colleague, have 15 face-to-face, so that she's not trying to manage both in her first year as a teacher. All right, so that's one option. The second option, let's take the 28 students who chose MyPCS Online and give them all to one teacher. And I'm sorry, there were 41 students. Let's give 28 to one teacher. And then let's spread out the remaining 13 to lower the TPR in face-to-face. A third option, let's take 2 units and make it MyPCS Online, 20 and 21, and then have 16, 16, and 15 in face-to-face. So you can go through these options and see where there's benefits, right? There's options where we have very few students face-to-face. There's options where we follow the MOU exactly at 28. And then there's the option of, it makes sense in a normal year, you'd say, well, just split it out equally, right? But this doesn't necessarily drive down the TPR, and it does go above our suggested of 15 a little bit. So Mrs. Young-Parker sat with her first grade team and then did this in 2nd grade and 3rd grade and 4th grade and 5th grade. And this is what has happened across the district for the last week or so as we've tried to match up teachers to the MyPCS Online, to the traditional, as well as look at space in the building, look at available resources. And in Kathleen's case, she's a Title I school that also has instructional coaches, some paraprofessionals, and she has plans to use those folks to lower TPR. Now, not every school has that same ability as well. So we wanted to give you an example and have Mrs. Young-Parker here to answer questions from the board about what does it look like in elementary. I think the next slide is actually just some shots of Campbell Park and how they've been building out their social distancing. Remember, Campbell Park is a full school. There's not empty space. I mean, it is, you know, every classroom is full in a regular school year. So for them to be able to have several hundred students in MyPCS Online and to push down those face-to-face numbers is important. So I'll pass it to the board for questions from Mrs. Young-Parker if there are any.
You want to review your scheduling in terms of how it proceeded with your teachers and the discussions? I think that's insight that
basically,
the board wants to hear.
basically what Kevin said. I met with every grade level, and pretty much I wanted them to feel comfortable in this process. And the option that we chose for first grade was actually the first option. They wanted the least amount of students face-to-face, and they met, and the new teacher, of course, did not want to juggle both of it. So that's what we decided on that option. But it was pretty much the same in every grade level, and I think we've pretty much hit the targets. We're still working on 4th and 5th to drive those numbers down, but we're trying, our goal was to have 12 or less in every class face-to-face.
Okay, good. Renee?
How you doing? So for your portables, I think it's like 3 on that back side. we still will be utilizing, there will be classes in the portables? Because that, to me, that seemed like a smaller space when I visited. The portable space just
So
seemed
what we
smaller.
did for those, I think they're called stackables over there that you're referring to, we actually moved those classrooms out. I moved 3 of those classrooms into the building, and I put, I have a teacher who's going to be doing online in one of those classrooms, full online, so there's no students. And then that is VE, pull-out, reading recovery, I put them down there.
Okay. And then for your cafeteria, and this, Kevin, this will be just for any cafeteria where you're having multiple lunches or whatever. Are you able to work that out so that the spacing is going to be good for the number of students, or having like a lunch option in the classroom, or a mixture?
So what we've done is, we've basically taken the benches, and it's basically 1 student per bench. We actually have numbered them. And so when the student comes in, they know I'm at number 68, or I'm in that number, whatever. I believe we have spacing for 72 students in there, and then we possibly could use the media center, but since our face-to-face numbers are pretty low, I think we'll be able to manage that. Because right now, I mean, kindergarten face-to-face right now is like 6 or 7. First grade is like 8, so those numbers are pretty low.
Okay. And this is just for other staff. I know we talked about basically persons who are non-essential, not having them on site, because of safety. But in some of our schools, and super kudos to Ms. Parker and her team, and I know Carlos Childs and just so many others are doing a wonderful job. They're working with the students, so I just wanted to get that out to you. But for some of those schools, even though the classes may be smaller, we still may have that struggling student who certainly benefits from that grandparent program where that person's sitting with them for a pull-out. So are we still allowing those types of services to be a part of the school day for those, if they choose? Because for some, that really, for that school year loss that we were talking about, that may be critical to keeping them engaged, but keeping them, on track. So
Do you
I
want
don't
me to
know.
answer that?
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to, or if so.
And
Yeah.
maybe you could dovetail into the answers of your paraprofessionals and your other, because as a Title I school and also as a part of a grant with the community school, you have other types of personnel on
Oh, yeah.
On deck.
yours. So how are you looking as a principal? I'm trying to get the principal's, optics or lens to the board. So so now you have all these other adults that you're trying to repurpose so that those 8 kids in a school, in a class, there's still a couple struggling, and there's some struggling online.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're utilizing our teachers on deck also as well to help drive down the numbers. So basically, there will be no empty space. But we do have a lot of students that may need support online. So we'll be pulling small groups with some of those personnels online, as well as trying to provide as much individualized instruction face-to-face for those families that are there. So everybody will be utilized as much as possible. And I know Kevin mentioned about instructional coaches. We do still have new teachers that will need support. So we will try to build in some coaching and, where it's workable with them as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that for anyone who may be listening, because there has been a lot of conversation about learning loss and how we would be able to support those students if in fact they chose to go virtual, because that's what works best for them. How will we provide those supports? So I'm so glad that you just shared that even those that are virtual, there would be that small group opportunity
Oh,
for
absolutely.
them. So thank you for sharing that. Because I know I feel a little bit better, just being concerned about some of those students who may not have a parent or an adult who can help them with the lesson.
Right.
But we still are providing that, so that's wonderful.
Yes, I reached out to Dan Evans actually just to have him to run my my numbers, and I wanted to look at who my L25 was and kind of start building groups for those students that were online, because I do have a lot of students that are online that need that support. So we're making sure that they have those reading groups as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
The board members, there's pluses and minuses to any of this. I hope you start to see this. One of the pluses you see, and I'm glad you sat down with your teachers, and ask their input. So this isn't just a top-down. We're talking about, so what would be the best thing? So if they chose that first, which I see, you know, there's pluses and minuses. One of the pluses, the teacher really owns those students. Those are their original students. And let's say after 9 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks, the students start to come back. Now there's a seat right there. One of the things our plan did was promise with my PCS Online is that there was going to be a seat in that classroom. And there's distinct seat in that same classroom. You get to know the teacher, you get to know that we're not switching. So there, you know, there's some minuses too, in the awkwardness of doing both. But, you know, so you've done a masterful job of that, and two of that. And as I mentioned to the board earlier, I really do think we need to get with our medical professionals to review all of the lunchroom configurations and see, because a lot of this is going to be dictated on, so how many students are actually coming back to Campbell Park, and where can we divide and conquer the lunchroom so we're not concerned with having to quarantine a whole
Right.
lunch group. That's going to be a critical work this week.
Eileen has a question.
I've gotten a lot of emails from kindergarten parents, and this is your school and for the district. You know, kindergarten, they want to walk their kids in, and they also want that meet the teacher, because they want to know who they're leaving their child with. How are we handling that this year?
So one of the directions we gave was you can do face-to-face, right? You can call parents in and have them come in and meet the teacher, right? It doesn't need to be what it was in the past, was maybe a 2-hour in the classroom, right? That's too much. But they can come in, wave to the teacher, hello. This is before school I'm talking about. Or you
Okay.
can do it online, right? So we've shown them how to facilitate those conversations online. On the first day of school, we've told school principals, based on your building and the routing and the parking and all those other things, parents have to be able to bring their child to kindergarten. We can't say you have to drop them off at the gate outside and keep going. So can they go in and stay for 30 minutes? No, they can't. But if they have a face mask on and they can walk them to the building, and Mrs. Young Parker has a way for them to go in, drop the child off, and exit right out, then that's okay. Now, if it doesn't work at that school because of the way the traffic pattern is and the way how many kids are, then it doesn't work. So the principal will look at that. That's not every parent in every grade level, but kindergarten is different.
Kindergarten is special.
Right.
Yeah, it's unique. I remember they had to pull me off campus.
Still do at Congress.
Yeah, well.
Oh, my Lord.
Insensitive.
I have just one question. It's kind of a general question,
Let the schools.
and it may have already been answered somewhere along the way. But when a new student comes to Pinellas County, will they still have the option of either going face-to-face or online? And they'll still be, you know,
Yes.
assigned classes like they always
Correct.
have, but they will still have those choices.
Yes.
Think of it
Okay.
as the schedule change when that happens now. So we'll build the structure and we'll be able to, it'll be placing that student in this classes like you would in a regular, so I'm
I thought
thinking more of
so.
a
I
high
wasn't-
school or middle school schedule, but you think of it that way. A little bit more complex,
Yeah.
but still doable.
Okay, Nicole?
So I want to clarify what you said, Mr. Hendrick, because and this was a concern I had that you brought up this long, with not only kindergarten, but with all grades for back to school. Because the point was made or brought to my attention that, you know, we're going to be, if it's safe enough for us to have students in the building, how is it not safe enough to have a face-to-face back to school? And I guess I'm thinking, yes, kindergarten's really important. So sixth grade, right? Going to a new middle school is a big deal. And so's freshman year. So, I mean, in the past, as a freshman, you had a whole week at times of orientation or a math placement or different things we used to do to help kids transition into high school or transition into, I think we had a grant for that actually for a while. And now, if it's safe enough for us to have this number of students in the building, couldn't we offer a open house or back to school, whichever, preschool, before there are kids on campus, opportunity for families, and it could be a different grade at different times of the day, you know, or different days.
Or different
Like this
schedules.
kid, we're the kindergarten team. Monday, they come, Tuesday, your class comes, Wednesday, whatever it is, the individual building levels would have to, but it seems sort of challenging for me to be able to explain that we feel it's safe enough to bring the kids in, but it's not safe enough to let the parents do a walkthrough prior to us opening the building. So I just want to see, how do we bring those two different recommendations together, because they seem to conflict. And I'm not just asking you, I guess I'm asking
No,
you, Dr.
I think we
Greco.
can answer that because we gave principals direction on that specifically because of exactly what you just said. So I think we can all understand why we wouldn't want to put 800 people in an auditorium for a freshman
Right.
orientation like typically happens. I mean, almost every parent and every student comes to a ninth grade orientation. So that's not a good practice, right? So what are other ways? So break your ninth grade up into alphabets, and over the course of the day, these 50 students and their parents come from 8 to 9, right? And they pick up books, and you might have to give out computers to your MyPCS Online students. So I think Brett and Mr. Patterson and Mr. Bulleris can talk about what they're doing specifically at their school, but we gave that direction to principals. You can have parents and students online. It just needs to be done in smaller groups, grade levels, right, or break those things out. And by the way, we use Microsoft Teams as our platform for live, and that only takes up to 250 people at a time. So you can't do a ninth grade orientation with the whole ninth grade because it's not possible. So there are high schools that have been doing 50 students a day, and they've been doing that over the course of 2 weeks so that they get everybody, and the students and their parents feel like they can ask questions.
Okay.
So there's different ways schools have been doing that.
Thank you.
And to your point, they don't make sense to be able to say, how can you have school but not have people come and at least see what the school looks like? They can. It just needs to
Okay.
be done in a responsible way.
Okay, so we are going to allow families to visit in some way, shape, or form, or capacity prior to coming to school if
If the school
principals can
sets
work
that
it
up.
out.
Yeah.
Okay. And, okay, so they could do it by program. Okay,
Okay. All
thank
right,
you.
Let's go to Mr. Bulleris. Come on up, Danny, if you will. Thank you, Mrs. Young-Parker. And let's take a look at Safety Harbor Middle School. As we get to secondary, the dynamic changes considerably in terms of how you build master schedules and the certifications that go with that. So we're going to take a look at an English language arts example, which is in middle school, every student takes English language arts. And so here's by grade level, language arts 1, language arts 2, language arts 3. So think 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And then you have some students in 8th grade taking the high school course, and you have some students receiving ESOL services in addition to their English class. So in 6th grade, you have 123 chose MyPCS Online, and 178 chose face-to-face. And then 7th grade and 8th grade together. If you're looking at the numbers like I did, you say, well, wait a minute, 7th grade is so much bigger than 6th grade. And the answer is that just happens to be at Safety Harbor this year. There's about 100 more students in 7th grade than 6th grade. That's just the way the registrations fell out. So what Mr. Bulleris and his team did was to look at their schedule and say, how can we reduce the numbers of students face-to-face and get it to 20 or fewer? And what does that do with MyPCS Online? And then do we choose simultaneous, or do we have pure classes of MyPCS Online? So you can see these numbers represent the number of students on average in those sections. These represent the number of students on average in those sections in MyPCS Online, and how many of each there are. So if you'll go to the next slide, this is what, if you've ever seen a secondary master schedule, you're used to this sort of matrix, right? So the sections in yellow are face-to-face sections, and the sections in gray are MyPCS Online sections. And what Safety Harbor decided was in English, they weren't going to have any simultaneous classes. They were either going to be all MyPCS Online or all face-to-face. And they were able to build this out to have this occur where everything was 20 or fewer, and the teachers looked and said, okay, I know this is 35 and 35, and the MOU said 32, but this is the way we think it will work best at our school, and they agreed to this model. They also, if you look at this, you could look and say, well, if I change this class with this class, right, you might be able to have a full-time MyPCS Online teacher. But as Mr. Bulleris worked with his team, they felt that this was the best way for them and it met the needs of all the teachers. So even though he had one Category 1 teacher in this group, that teacher said, you know what, with this schedule, that's fine for me. I can do 1 or 2 face-to-face and feel socially distanced and have everything else work out. So in secondary schools, this same conversation then repeats in mathematics, repeats in science, it repeats in social studies, and so on. And this just happens to be a different example. So I wanted to show you a different example without simultaneous teaching, although there are other examples in his school that are simultaneous teaching. He has some teachers. He has a Chinese teacher. She's the only one. There's no other option except for simultaneous in that case, right? Because you have not only the only teacher, but then singleton classes along the way. So, Danny, do you want to just talk briefly about the process that you worked with your teachers to do this?
Definitely. Well, when the MOU first came out, I reached out to all the teachers that put their request in and kind of gave them some insight on the timeline. And then we began to focus on the level 4 teachers, the level 1 teachers, to make sure that we had a collaborative process with those teachers. And when Ms. Texel was saying that this changes daily, I was nodding my head, because eventually we had a teacher that submitted documentation and she became level 1. So what we did do is we moved the section up and we made that teacher full virtual. So those conversations are continuing to happen as we move into, I don't have any level 2, but as we move into level 3 and level 4. I do have a handful of level 4 teachers, and I've inquired and kind of talked to those teachers, and half of those teachers do have a concern, and we're going to be working with them. And then some of them just truly do enjoy teaching virtually and have put their name in the hat to teach virtually. So we're going to work our way down to those level 1s. But it is a long process, but it's worth it, especially when, you can call a teacher and you can say, this is what we have to offer, and they're just very grateful that they have that option. So this is kind of what we did at Safety Harbor with our 4 level 1s, and then moving into our level 2, 3, and 4.
If we can hit the next picture, it just gives, next slide, a couple of pictures and examples of what Safety Harbor is doing in terms of social distancing. So questions for Mr. Bulleris about middle school, how that's working, master schedules, or anything in between?
Yeah, what are you doing with schedule, class change?
Mm-hmm. With class change in between, passing?
In between classes, the passing.
So if you, if you look at the picture, all the way at the end, what we've done, since we are not utilizing lockers this year, we've made directional hallways, so students can, walk on one or other on the other side of the hallway. Students have 4-minute passing time. They don't have lockers, and that's how they're going to change classes. We are. I didn't think this would happen, but almost 50% of our community decided to learn online. So it has worked out for us because we do have a newer building. We do have the capacity for class change, a safe class change.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Nicole?
Just thank you for
Anybody else?
I can't even imagine how much, and I feel really fortunate. I was able to visit a number of schools and talk to APCs and principals at the secondary level. And it can take a week just to fill the holes in the schedule once you get the master schedule built.
Yeah.
So I can't even begin to fathom how you're getting all of this done when it keeps changing.
Yeah.
So you're changing every day, plus you have probably a line of teachers or emails, because they can't stand in line, so asking for their schedule.
Yeah.
So this has been a tremendous amount of work for you. I don't want that to go unacknowledged for all of our principals and our assistant principals who, once you think you got your master schedule set, a new thing's coming at you,
Yeah.
and you're having to change again. So, and that's really hard because it tests your integrity with your staff, and it puts you in a vulnerable position. And I just want to say, as a board, I think how much we appreciate you as individuals for that kind of work, because I know as we're becoming aware of things, or the public's becoming aware of things, we're articulating them, or, you know, as staff get some other situational change, and it really comes right at you. And you're the ones who have to then face everybody. So decisions made here, or, you know, advice or a new idea or things, they impact you so much. And so thank you to you and the others in the administrative role at the building for doing this, because I don't know if the public recognizes, or sometimes even we have to be reminded because we're not doing it anymore, that